Hi everybody, I hope you're well. I am currently sipping coffee and sitting on my living room floor because it's so cozy to be next to our Christmas tree. But I do promise I will not spill my coffee. I know some of you are very concerned about that in previous videos and vlogs. What can I say? I talk with my hands, even though I'm an editor who works with her words. I talk with my hands. So anyway, if you found this video, it probably means that you have finished your novel or at least completed a first draft of your novel, and that is so exciting. You should be so proud of yourself. I'm clapping for you. Seriously, congratulations. That is big, and now that you have to edit your book and return to your novel, that feeling may be looming over you. It's a little bit intimidating, and this is a really important stage, that self-editing stage before you pass your book off to a professional editor. It is a really crucial part of the process. This is about shaping what you have in a first draft and making it workable, and just remembering and kind of narrowing your focus to remember what it is you love about your book and what it really needs in a big picture sense. Cheryl Klein, who was the continuity editor on 2 of the Harry Potter books, she has this book called Second Sight, and it's a book on revision. And she talks about how the word revise, the Latin word for revise, actually means to visit again, to see again. Returning to your manuscript for the self-editing process is about considering your work with fresh eyes and kind of listening to those spidey senses that you may have about what's working and what's not working in a big picture sense. You have to listen to yourself. You have to really take the time to listen to yourself. And for that reason, I'm splitting this video up into 2 categories. I'll have timestamps down below. But I want to talk about self-editing before the self-editing stage and during your self-editing, some tips that you can implement into your process. Okay, so my first tip before you start self-editing might sound a little bit weird, but stick with me. Writing your marketing copy. Now, you may not have any marketing experience. You may not plan to use any of the material that you write for actually promoting your book, but this is a crucial step because first of all, it helps you step away from your actual manuscript to write and focus on your writing skills, but not on your actual manuscript. It also helps you narrow your focus even more to remember what it is that's so compelling about your book, what you really want readers to know about it, and to really assess whether or not that comes across on the page. So what I'm talking about is the jacket material, the back cover, blurb, any kind of like elevator pitch that you would be using in a proposal or on a website. This would basically be anything that you need to communicate about your book to motivate readers to pick it up. Writing it does not mean that this is the flap copy that you are going to use. You may decide to scrap the whole thing. This is really just a writing exercise. It's a way to just kind of focus on what you're really trying to accomplish in the book and the themes that you want to explore and all of those big picture elements to make sure everything's in place to return to the vision and heart of your book. That's why I suggest writing the marketing copy, even as an exercise, purely as an exercise. You may discover in writing the marketing material that you actually need to go in a completely different direction in one area of your book. Or maybe it just solidifies for you in a clearer, larger sense what the book is really about at its core. This is really about priming the pump before you start revising. So, don't get bogged down in a sales pitch. If you don't have marketing experience, it's really okay. Either way, this is going to be a fruitful exercise. My second tip is to get curious. So I mentioned your spidey senses. I think, obviously every author is going to have blind spots in the story that a professional editor should be able to flag, pinpoint, whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, when it comes to self-editing and shaping your novel after a first draft, you really have to trust your gut. There are scenes or moments in the plot or, pieces of character development that may not sit right with you for some reason. And I want you to really get curious about that and lean into it. Maybe you don't really know how to fix it, but something's off. Like the character development seems off, or the action scene, something about it is lagging, or maybe the dialogue doesn't feel realistic to you and you don't really know why. Maybe a character just doesn't really come to life on the page the way that she did in your head. The first step is to lean into those spidey senses that you have and get curious. So if you're kind of noticing some awkwardness surrounding dialogue, look into some resources on dialogue. Look up podcasts, articles. There's so many writing resources out there about specific storytelling techniques. And it's really important to kind of compartmentalize in a way at this stage in your novel. You want to hone your craft and be as specific as possible. So if it's dialogue that you're really noticing needs work, research. Ask fellow writers in your community. Ask people on Twitter, how do they handle dialogue? What are some tips that they have that have worked for them in their own manuscripts? And then go into your revision with all of these resources at your disposal. I think a lot of people say to write better, you have to write all the time. You have to practice writing and you have to practice. And yes, I 100% believe that is true, but I also think there's a time and a place for every author to put on that, research hat and go out and really conduct research, to kind of do a diagnostic report on your book and say what is working, what isn't, but not just, I'll keep at it until I get better. But how can you actually get better? How can you really discover some tools that will help you moving forward, not just in this manuscript, but in every manuscript? I think it was Anne Lamott who said, good dialogue gives us the sense that we're eavesdropping. So if your dialogue feels stilted, it's time to get curious and kind of snoop around and see what you find. In the same way, if you want the world building to be more complex than it currently is, don't just look at, say you're writing a fantasy book and you start to look at other fantasy writers' work. That is a great idea, but don't just stop there. Look up interviews by those authors. See if you can find podcasts, articles, blogs, other tangible resources where they talk about their actual craft or the process for them in creating the world that you enjoyed so much when you read about it. Be a student of your craft and do what you can to target specific storytelling techniques and kind of assess your novel within those buckets. My third tip for before you self-edit is to know the kind of writer that you are and honor that. This is a crucial step for that pre-revision stage. You need to know your writing habits and be as honest as possible with yourself about what your book actually needs. Ask yourself if you need to take some time away to recharge your creative batteries before you even look at your manuscript again, or maybe you're the kind of writer who needs to ride that wave of momentum and go straight into self-editing. I can't answer that for you. No other writer can answer that for you. It really just depends on who you are and how you work, how you tick. I will say that if you're going to put your manuscript away for a time, make sure to have a return date in mind. Don't just, close the tab in your mind on your book and think that, one day I'll feel inspiration to pick it up again. The chances are it's going to be a lot harder to return to your book if you've put it away for a while. Not always the case, but, you have to push past some of the blocks that you may be feeling. Don't abandon the story. If you really want to publish this book, don't abandon it without any start date in mind. Make sure that you set plenty of reminders for yourself. If it's a week, if it's a month, if it's 3 months, whatever the time frame may be that you need to recharge your creative batteries, just make sure you have a start date in mind. If you decide to push through and continue on with the self-editing process, make sure that you are sustaining your creative well simultaneously. Leave room in your writing and editing schedule to watch movies, read books, listen to podcasts, things that will inspire you and rejuvenate you. Go on a walk, be in nature. Just make sure that you leave time for that, because that is just as important as working on your actual novel. Okay, now I have 3 tips for when you're actually editing your novel. So the first one is to create a book outline that maps out your novel scene by scene or chapter by chapter. This will help you to pinpoint areas of the book that feel thin, or maybe recognize chapters that stray a little too far from the book's purpose and drive. I mentioned Cheryl Klein. She's amazing. Her book, Second Sight, is such an amazing resource on revision. But she has this chapter in her book called The Art of Detection that's all about book mapping and outlining. And I think it's really worth looking into no matter what kind of author you are. Number 2, give yourself permission to sidestep the grammar police in your first revision after the first draft. Listen, as a copy editor, this kind of hurts my soul a little bit, but I do think it is a crucial step for authors shaping their stories after a first draft. Once you make big picture substantive changes to your book, that's when you can return to your manuscript and check for typos and grammar and punctuation and usage and things like that. Don't stifle your creativity before you get there, and don't get bogged down by, punctuation and grammar and usage and syntax. Your job is to get the story on the page. The copy editor's job is to check and see if there's a stray, rogue single quotation mark in that paragraph. Your job is to put magic on the page, especially at this stage in the process. So don't forget that. My third piece of advice is to cut out unnecessary words. Revision, editing, it's all about trimming down and only keeping what advances the story, tightening the language. And a lot of this is going to come with line edits with a professional editor. You're not going to do a perfect job of this just because, like I mentioned, every author has blind spots. Every author, you're looking at your story through one lens, and we all need a second set of eyes to review our work. It's always better to cut out words and realize that you have too thin of a manuscript and you have more meat that you can add to it than to keep fluff that no reader is going to care about. I actually have a video all about overused words in fiction, how to recognize them and cut them out. So I will link that all down below. But those are my main 3 tips for while you're self-editing and 3 tips for before the self-editing process. I hope these words were valuable to you. I hope they're helpful as you begin your self-editing journey. It's seriously so exciting, and I always tell my authors that they are doing the hard work. Revision is the hard work. Writing this story is difficult, no doubt, but returning to it with a critical eye is like next level challenging, and you have to be kind to yourself. You have to be gentle with yourself and give yourself what you need to refill your creativity and to make sure that the story you love and care about gets in the hands of readers who also care about it. Now, one last thing I want to share. Some of you know that I have a Freelance Editing 101 e-course that's all about launching or growing your editorial business. This is geared toward editors, but I like to tell authors as well, anytime you can hone your editing skills, it is so valuable to your work. So I have an editing checklist that I like to share with my students in the course, and I'm going to share it with you for free, linked down below. If you sign up for my newsletter, you will get the downloadable editing checklist. And I think, especially with the Chicago Manual of Style, which is the main style guide in the book publishing industry, I think it's really helpful. So if you're interested in that, definitely sign up for my newsletter, and I will be back, I'm sure, to share more tips for authors and editors and I hope you enjoy the self-editing process. As an editing nerd myself, I'm very excited for it. So yeah, I think that's it. I will talk to you later. Bye, friends.